Sorry, we're getting ready to have the puja on Friday, so I was on the phone with a couple people. So, we are in chapter 13, at Darjeeling in Calcutta. Miss Margaret Noble, now you know there's a sister named Vedanta, made her first visit to India in late January 1898. She stayed at a house in Antali, Calcutta, with Miss Mueller. Now, Miss Mueller was Sister Christine, another Western disciple of Swamiji. At this time, the monastery was temporarily housed at Neelambar Mukherjee's garden house, where with his brother disciples, Swamiji was living. At Swamiji's request, Akhandananda paid a visit to Antali to meet Miss Noble and to learn something of the kindergarten method of teaching from her. When introduced, Miss Noble was happy to meet the Swami, as she had already heard of him and his activities at Murshidabad. And at once she cried, "Oh, famine Swami, famine Swami. We often spoke of you in England." Swamiji initiated Miss Noble into the first vows of renunciation and gave her the name Vedanta, the dedicated. A few days later, he invested Brahmachari Suran, who was assisting Swami Akhandananda at Sarkachi, with sannyasa. Shortly after this, on March 30th, Swamiji and Swami Akhandananda left for Darjeeling. Swamiji was the guest of Sri M.N. Banerjee, a government lawyer, and Swami Akhandananda put up at Rosebank, 1.5 miles away. Swamiji would go to Rosebank every morning and would return by noon to his own quarters, accompanied by his brother monk. One day, Swamiji gave Swami Akhandananda a complete surprise. "Give up all work," he said. "What's the good of it all? Forget your orphanage." In utter astonishment, Swami Akhandananda replied, "What are you saying? Only after asking for your consent and receiving it did I commence the work. Without your approval, I would never have started the work at Mohula. I had ideas about going to Central Asia, the goal of my travel days. It was only at your express command that I put myself under the yoke of an orphanage. Letters are coming from Mohula saying that they can't get on without me." As Swamiji listened to his brother's reply, his serene face wore an indescribable glow of joy, and he dropped the topic altogether. A day or two after this, Swami Akhandananda expressed a desire to go to Sikkim. Everything was arranged, and there was only a week or so left before the trip was to begin. When Swamiji heard of it, he said to the Swami, "You mentioned that you were receiving letter after letter from Mohula, and now you were proposing to go to Sikkim." He had a wire sent to Mohula immediately with the message that Swami Akhandananda would be back there in a fortnight. In the meantime, an epidemic of plague had broken out in Calcutta. Many were falling victim to the dread disease, and the city was in panic. As the news reached Darjeeling, a sudden change came over Swamiji. Later, Swami Akhandananda related the incident. Swamiji was full of joy at this time, but one day suddenly we found him looking very grave. He touched no food the whole day, nor did he utter a single word. The civil surgeon was called in, but he could not find anything wrong. Swamiji sat the whole day with his head buried in a pillow. Then we heard that it was the news that 3/4 of the population of Calcutta had fled the city out of fear of the plague, which had brought about this change in him. Swamiji then said, "We must render whatever service we can, even if we have to sell all we have." In the first week of May, before he could regain his health, Swamiji returned to Calcutta. The Holy Mother was then living in a rented house on Bospara Lane in Bog Bazar. Such was the panic in the city that it cost 6 rupees to hire a hackney carriage from Sealdah station to Bog Bazar due to lack of drivers. While he was at Darjeeling, Kashishwari Devi, the wife of Sri M.N. Banerjee, on hearing of the newly opened orphanage, had handed over to Swami Akhandananda 2 orphan boys of the hills. Later, 2 local boys joined the party. At the station, 2 more boys introduced themselves as orphans and sat down by the Swami as the train was about to start. But at Siliguri, the police took custody of the latter 2 boys, their guardian, having in the meantime wired Swami Vivekananda in Calcutta, "Your man has taken away my boys." When Swami Akhandananda arrived at the Holy Mother's residence with the remaining 4 orphans, he found Swami Sardananda waiting for him with the telegram. At once, Swami Akhandananda met Swamiji and told him all that had happened. After hearing about the boys, Swamiji advised him always to carry letters of introduction in future, and also credentials which would explain his work to the public and to any representative of the government. A morning or 2 later, now, this is certainly what we have learned from Swami Sarvagatananda, who was a disciple of Swami Akhandananda. Being spiritual but staying practical. Have your papers in order. A morning or 2 later, as Swami Akhandananda came out of Balaram Babu's house on his way to bathe in the Ganga, he saw people hurrying home instead of to their offices. He learned that a tram car had been stopped nearby and was not allowed to proceed further because of the panic in the city. A meeting was held at this time at Nilambar Mukherjee's garden house. Swamiji addressed the members of the Math and assembled devotees. "We have gathered here in the sacred name of God. We should throw fear of death to the winds and set ourselves to nursing victims of plague. We are prepared, if necessary, to sell the land newly purchased for the Math and even to lay down our lives so that we may serve them with nursing, care, and medicine." It was decided at the meeting that some relevant information should be circulated among the people both in Bengali and Hindi. Handbills were to be printed and distributed in order to restore confidence among the people and to enlighten them about the good intentions of the government in its efforts to help. The section of the uneducated folk, both Hindus and Muslims, had formed some false notions regarding vaccination and had begun to create disturbances. Swami Akhandananda translated the material into Hindi and also took upon himself the responsibility of having the bills printed and circulated, though at that time movement in Calcutta involved considerable risk. This false notions about vaccinations has been going on for many years. The Swami was seen coming out of a press at Bog Bazar with an enormous bundle of handbills. Such was the interest of the people that hardly had he reached Harrison Road, now Mahatma Gandhi Road, the crowd came pressing in from all sides in such numbers that he was almost suffocated. He tossed bunches of handbills into the open shops to distract the crowd, and pressure was relieved for a while. But he was soon besieged again, and only with difficulty was he able to reach the Mint House on the Strand Road by scattering the bills along the way until he came to a devotee's house. As soon as he reached the first floor of the devotee's house, 4 or 5 men rushed to gather around him, asking, "Who are you? Why are you helping the government?" The Swami was about to try to explain matters to them when the devotee told them, "It will only be a loss of labor to do so, Swamiji. They won't be convinced. Please hand the bills over to me and go inside, or your life may be endangered." Thus, he was saved from the hooligans by his friend's presence of mind. Later, sitting near the Mint, he distributed the handbills that day, as well as the following day. Though his health was indifferent, he went the 3rd day to Kalighat, another sensitive area of the city. Here also he found the people's attitude hostile. They asked tauntingly, "How much has the government paid you? Is life so cheap?" Swami Akhandananda made an attempt to tell them that about the causes of plague and its prevention. But who was there to listen? He was taken to the orphanage. Okay, if you had the book, you would see some pictures of Swami Akhandananda at different ages. But I don't think they're going to show if I hold them up because they're black and white photos. So we'll start chapter 14. We won't go too far. Service becomes a living force, part 1. When Swami Akhandananda returned to the ashram, he learned that the elder of the 2 ailing brothers, who had been handed over to him by the aged Vaishnava lady, had left the ashram after regaining his health. He also met a helpless widow who came to the ashram and wanted her 2 children to join the orphanage. The children were suffering from enlarged spleens along with other ailments. Though still of tender age, they were taken into the ashram, and with medical attention and suitable diet, they soon regained their normal health. The 4 orphans from Darjeeling proved to be a lively and hard-working set, whose playfulness and innocent mischief gained for them the affection of the villagers. Only one among them was rather weak in comparison with the strong and hardy boys who filled the small hut with the noise and fun. Life for them at Darjeeling had been hard. Chipping stones, they fended for themselves as best they could. Jaspir Singh, the eldest of the group, was 14 years old. He had the desire to go to the orphanage with the Swami when he heard that the other 2 boys were going there. Chabilal, the second boy, was 11. He drew the affection of Swami Akhandananda from the beginning at the railway station. Ranabir III was 12, and the 4th boy, Bahadur, was 13 years of age. Bahadur was born of Gurkha parents. His father had died in battle. People would enjoy listening to him talk about his country and the life of the people there, for he was remarkably intelligent for his age. He was also full of fun and activity. The loss of an eye seemed no handicap to him. He had already become quite well known for his musical voice at Darjeeling, and it was this which first drew the attention of Kashishwari Devi. Through her kindness, he came under the care of Swami Akhandananda. More of him will be told in a later chapter. There were 7 boys now at the ashram. Among them, 2 were in ill health. Altogether, 9 or 10 persons, including adults, were living in one small hut. The lack of accommodation and funds did not dim their faith and reliance on the Lord, however. Even if there were 100 inconveniences, there was never any want of joy and enthusiasm among them. As purchases continued to be made on credit, another hut was raised before an appeal for funds was issued. It was Swami Akhandananda's principle to appeal to the public for funds only after each of the departments had begun to function according to plan. Therefore, he kept only a few friends informed of the work that was being done. Just a few days after the second hut was completed, the kindly Mother Savior, Swamiji's English disciple, every evening they gathered together for prayers and chanted the names of God. Having surmounted various obstacles already and full of hope for the future development of the ashram, Swami Akhandananda, with only one assistant, silently devoted himself to the others. His conviction was that serving others was the most suitable path for spiritual development in this age. Attracted by the ideal of this selfless sannyasin, several young men came to stay at the ashram to perform the chores or to teach the boys, imbibing the spirit of the new ideal. Want of accommodation had now become a serious problem. Appeals to the landlord of Mahula were in vain. It was not until Srimati Madhusundari Burman made a gift of 1.5 acres of land from her property near Sargachi that matters began to improve. She appreciated the efforts of Swami Akhandananda and the difficulties he was having in building up the orphanage. This kind lady's unoccupied building at Shibnagar on the highway between Sargachi and Babta was placed at the disposal of the ashram, which was a boon to them at this critical time. In October 1898, after Durga Puja, the great autumnal festival of the Divine Mother, the orphanage moved into the 2-storied brick building where the lady herself often used to stay. The old historical Gola Krishnanagar Road of the days of the Nawabs of Bengal was just in front of the building. The mango grove of Plassey, now a famous historical landmark, was about 18 miles to the south. It was along this road that the army of Sirajuddaulah, the last independent Nawab of Bengal, marched from Murshidabad to the battlefield of Plassey. The sizable plot of arable land now around the house, upon which the boundary walls still partially stood, had a gate to the front yard. On the ground floor were 3 rooms of different sizes and a long open veranda. There was a hall on the first floor, which had a veranda running north to south. On one of its walls hung the familiar photograph of Sri Ramakrishna. The office and library, too, were accommodated here. After arranging the furniture, a small space at one end was left for Swami Akhandananda to spread his bed. A flower garden and potted plants gave a new look to the house. Everything was kept scrupulously clean, and an atmosphere of peace and purity would be felt even by a casual visitor. With this more commodious building and a compound, the ashram began to show progress. Some young men came to dedicate themselves to its service. Swami Trigunatitananda, paying his second visit to the orphanage at this time, was glad to find that it was more firmly established. Among the orphanage's early well-wishers was Paramdadas Mitra at Varanasi. Swami Akhandananda had sought and received his generous financial support ever since the opening of the orphanage at Mahula. He wrote to the Swami 2 letters expressing his doubts regarding the true duty of the sannyasin. Usually a wandering life, austerities, and study were more appealing to a sannyasin than any kind of work or service. Moreover, they form the sannyasins' traditional code of conduct. The Swami's reply to these letters expresses the feelings of his heart, disclosing his own changed outlook. The two letters were, as it were, a commentary on the philosophical attitude of the sannyasin dedicated to service. Some relevant portions of them are given here. You have reminded me of my past, the recollections of which give me joy, but times have changed. While man's life is always changing, the soul is changeless. I am no more fond of traveling. When I went to the Himalayas, I was a different man altogether. The present change in me astonished me too. In those days in the Himalayas, the very sight of man was distasteful to me, and I shunned the villages and the society of man, and loved to live on solitary mountain tops infested with beasts of prey. Thus I lived a solitary life for many years together, but now I find the way I, that shunned man and traveled over the high peaks of the Himalayas, sees God present in man, and thinks the service to man is service to God. God seems to whisper in my ears, listen, this very man is the seer of the Vedic mantras. He came as Rama, Krishna, and other avatars. Verily, it is man that is everything. When human society reaches its crowning point of evolution, it is in this self-same man that we see the avatars like Rama and Krishna. When that society degenerates, it is for man himself to raise it up again. However, let me now answer your question. In spite of being occupied in philanthropic works entailing much expenditure, I have not had to think of money. Rather, most of my time has been spent and is being spent in the thought of God. And this also I know, that He is having His works done through us. For more than half an hour every morning and evening, I sit with the orphans to sing the glories of God, and then, in the Vedic manner, pray to God that His Spirit and power may descend upon us. My aim is to help the boys in building up their moral and spiritual life, and to make them fit for doing noble deeds. Working for the welfare of the many can only conduce to the growth of one's spiritual life and can never bring about any harm whatever. To know the self, one must live alone, but surely not forever. The wider a man's sympathies are, the more tender and less sophisticated will be his heart. Service to beings makes the virtues, like control of the body and mind, shine brighter, provided it is done without any selfish desire. Who is to practice this and who not? There can be no hard and fast rules in this. Work is unavoidable so long as one lives. Only it should be without any selfish end. A knower of the self, capital S, remains inactive, even though doing 1,000 acts. It is not for the householder, deluded by Maya, as he is, to appreciate this subtle truth. It remains hidden in the heart of the knowers of the self, engaged in doing good works. That was written 19 October 1898. And we're going to leave the second letter for our next reading. We always have to have a cliffhanger. Okay. So, Friday is Swami Vivekananda Puja here in Santa Barbara. Friday the 2nd. There will be the breakfast at 7 o'clock with the reading of the Katha Upanishad. Then at 11 a.m., the puja will begin, probably 10:30, but 11 is the official time. Puja will begin here in the temple. We'll go down to the convent for the home of fire at 12:45, and it will be followed by the prasad lunch. As you know, you're always all invited. Sunday, are we having a class on Saturday? Yes, it is. We will have a class Saturday at 5 p.m., gospel class. And then Sunday, Vrajaprana will give a talk on integrating the yogas. This is something we all need to know how to do, how to get them all together and work for us. Were there any questions on any of the reading that we did? Pretty self-explanatory. It's more like just a list of how he started and what he was doing. But interesting how many obstacles he met along the way with people when they were trying to do the plague relief. Very interesting in how they did it. Okay, so John, do you have a question?
Since there's no questions, I was a little curious as to why Swamiji said what he did to Akhandananda about why don't you give up all your work? Was he testing him, or was there a reason for it? And can you hear me on the new microphone?
Well, it's still pretty foggy, but I can hear you. Personally, I think Swamiji was once again testing his dedication.
Mm-hmm.
I think Swamiji was saying, give it all up. Don't go back there. And he wanted to see exactly how dedicated he was to keeping the work going.
Is that something he often did? I wondered if he was ambushing him, and it seemed a little maybe out of place.
No, I don't think so. Swamiji acted as the leader of the group he was can you say, after Ramakrishna died, the spiritual inspiration for the other brothers, though they were all knowers of Brahman themselves. He kept the fire of renunciation. He gathered the group together with Holy Mother's permission. And it was an entirely unique thing in monasticism in India for a group of sannyasins to have a permanent place of residence. This was not done in India. Sannyasins wandered and begged, and there were places set up where they could get food. But Swamiji inspired everyone and set up a mat where they all lived together and instilled in them that the purpose of the order was to realize God, but to worship God in man at the same time. Worship and save and serve God in man. It's the dual purpose of the order. So he was testing how much is your devotion? How much vigor do you have to go back up there by yourself and continue?
I know the Buddhists do some pretty nasty things to their trainees. Do you folks do that too?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Do you do what Swamiji did to your novices? I'm curious. Is that a standard technique?
Well,
Sure.
what was that? He wasn't a novice. Akhandananda was a direct disciple of Ramakrishna himself, a knower of Brahman. But they all revered Swamiji.
Okay.
And what he set up was what they did. And they did this out of their own free choice. Because any one of them could have walked off any time and started his own thing.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess we'll end with Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. And it's good to see you all. Stay healthy, stay warm. We're expecting a huge rainstorm tonight. At least that's what's predicted. And as one of the farmers at the farmer's market said, I'll wait until I see it.
Exactly.
It's on the radar right now. It's about 50 miles off the coast. It's
Yeah.
coming.
Well, they say 9:30, 10 tonight, so we'll see.
Lunch, dinner.
Okay. As I say, everyone stay safe.